Welcome everyone to our October session of Inside Redesign. Today with us we have our special guest Stacey Green, who is principal at Stockton Elementary, and of course we have our co-host Mr. Glenn Wiebe, the ever exciting, and we wonder what questions he's going to ask today. So
I got some good ones. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. So thanks everyone for joining us, and hope you enjoy today's show. And we're delighted to have Stacey with us. So I'm going to kick this over to Glenn and Stacey, and I'll sit back and throw in my 2 cents for it if Glenn ever lets me talk. Here we go.
I sent you a list of questions, Mike. You jump in whenever you want.
I know, and I will.
Okay, Stacey, thanks for being a part of this conversation about redesign. We've been doing this, like I said, for a couple of years, and it's always fun to kind of get an idea how different schools and different groups of people and different educators have interpreted that project. And so we're excited that you're here. One of the Mercury schools that has, you guys are the experts, right? Have been doing this for a while. So we want to pick your brain a little bit. But first, just so everybody knows, and I know that Stacey probably would not have ever mentioned this, but Stacey is, I got to make sure I get it right. She's a National Distinguished Principal from the state of Kansas in 2020 from the Kansas Association of Elementary School Principals. So let's get that out right away. You're a rock star, which is awesome that you want to spend some time answering questions with us and spreading the goodness of redesign to schools that we work with in the central part of the state. But here's my first question. I know that I'm guessing that as a distinguished national principal, there's like a big ceremony in Washington, D.C., right?
Correct, yes.
And I want to know when you're going, and I want to know what you're going to see first, because I'm a social studies guy. Let's get that out of the way right now. What are you going to go see if and when you ever get the chance to get to D.C.?
All right, so it looks something like this. First, thank you for having me. And I want to go back to not an expert, but maybe I pivoted the longest. We'll call it that now with Mercury Redesign. But actually, I'm supposed to be leaving tomorrow for DC, but those plans have been postponed. COVID halted all of this. So we were not having that gathering time in DC this fall. But next summer, July 8th to the 10th, when it's our annual convention in Chicago, we'll convene then and hopefully get to celebrate with the other NDPs across the country. So,
well, congratulations on that. Yes. Super disappointed that you don't get to go to Washington, D.C., though.
You're my replacement. I'm visiting with you all instead of traveling to KC and board a plane.
Not a disappointment at all. Absolutely not. You get to talk to Mike and Glenn instead of visiting Washington, D.C. and meeting famous people and seeing awesome stuff. Awesome. Okay. All right. Here's my first question as we get into this. And again, we've got about 45, 50 minutes and we can go in lots of different directions. So don't be afraid to interrupt us and share stuff that you want to talk about. But here's my first question. Think back a couple years ago when you first heard about the Mercury redesign project. Knowing what you know now, would you do it again?
Most definitely. It's been a journey like none other, but I have seen our staff grow like they never would have grown before, being pushed out of their comfort zones. We're just now, basically year 4 or 5, starting to see some results. And again, that's been paused and looks a little different with COVID, but we're at that place now where we know what's happening and what we've been doing is going to show us some ways to move forward better, but also much more critical thinkers about what we're doing and why we're doing it. So definitely I would do it again, all over again, and really not change anything. Even the hardest moments, the toughest moments, I wouldn't take those away from what happened, because that's where we probably bonded more as a staff, got to know our parents better because they pushed us like they hadn't been asked to push before, because we asked them to have a voice. So definitely wouldn't go back.
So what would be the hardest things? I mean, you mentioned even the hardest things we would do again. What's one of those hardest things that maybe might make it easier for somebody else if they knew that was coming?
One of the hardest moments is that myself and our then current high school principal superintendent happened to be away from the district for a conference for the state of Kansas. And our team of building leadership is what we called them, even though we were a district team, they were presenting to parents for one of the first times. they were hoping to keep it focused on redesign, but it opened up all kinds of things like where we stand in the morning to come into school. And I think that was the first time that we had school in front of parents, and it just opened up everything and it unloaded. And we were getting texts from a spouse of a teacher that was there saying, kind of run by run, here's what's happening. But she just kept saying, your teachers are doing amazing. Your teachers are doing
Awesome.
amazing. So we just learned that transparency is good. We've learned to become more comfortable with that. We've learned that we may present the same thing over and over and over again, and we'll still get asked that same question, but we present it like it's the very first time again.
Right.
That's just, yeah, so that was one of the harder times. Also, standards-based grading has probably been our biggest difficulty, just because it works really amazing at the pre-K 7 building and even 8th grade. But we move into high school and get into that transcript request and moving from what students know, making it turn into an A, B, C, or D for those scholarships and that type of thing. We're still pounding that out. And again, I think it's caused us to reflect on what is a grade, what is, what is learning, what is teaching. Again, I'm not going to go back, but I can tell you right now, we're still having those hard discussions. It's still not easy.
Yeah, I think that whole conversation of what learning is and how do you represent what that looks like, and how do you represent progress over time, either forward or backward, especially as parents just are so used to like, here's the 1 or here's the C or here's the plus sign or whatever. When we go to that standard-based grading, that is a huge transition. Was that one of the things that you intentionally, especially at the elementary building, did as part of redesign, or had that been going on earlier?
It had been going on, especially in our K-3 classrooms. A lot of what we moved to as a systems redesign had been happening in silos across our district. So it was an opportunity to take what was working well in pockets and to look at that systems change. So yes, our parents had grown accustomed to that at pre-K 3 level, but then we moved into 4th, we became pretty solid, just grades and just a traditional look of what grades were. So that was a pretty big shift there. It was, I want to pause just a little bit because I hadn't even thought about this till just now, reflecting back to even this August when we had some in-service time and really looked hard at that navigating change document and the competency-based. We were in a meeting, we broke it down into grade bands. So we were meeting with like the pre-K 3 team, the 4-7 high school. And at one point, a couple different staff meetings and 2 different sessions said, this is what we were looking for back in 17-18 when we were researching.
Wow.
The competency base has a social emotional, it has the standard, it has the big picture of project-based learning. That's almost those 3 ropes coming together was what we were looking for at that time, but we didn't really even know how to research that well because it wasn't new. Standards-based grading has been on a long time, but the more relevant nature to the research hadn't been a part of our collection early on. So that's been interesting. So
go ahead, Mike.
So how was the competencies received? Was it looked at by the teaching staff as this something that's paralleling the standards, or was it looked at as a complete shift? And are you going to go that direction with the competencies?
It was interesting when we first of all had the privilege of having a staff member serve to look at that early on formation of the navigating change document. She served on the pre-K 2 team, and I was able to come along in that second group and take part in some small groups as we looked at the assessment of and the lesson planning of, not the assessment, the lesson planning of the navigating change. So she and I had been looking at that the better part of the spring and early summer and getting really excited about it because we knew how that fit into what we were already doing. And then when we shared that out with staff and met with them in small groups, I think initially we thought, let's just go with this. But then when reality set in with all the operational changes coming about with COVID and bringing students back in after they hadn't been here in 176 just days. And then honestly, a really good PLC time with our state redesign team and Sarah saying to Andrea and specifically one of our team leaders, maybe slow down and let's look at that learning piece before we look at the grading piece. So we've really paused, especially at the elementary school, and looked at, we need to look a lot deeper before we just look at that competency-based grading. We've got to focus on the competency-based learning and just kind of shifting a little bit there. So yes, I do believe, I know several of my staff right now keep those competencies right in front of them. They're finding ways to tie that into what they're doing. We just haven't shifted how we're sharing that out to our families as far as the reporting part of it, more just building the foundations to being successful as we move forward.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and it makes sense to think about, the teaching and learning before we figure out the assessment piece, even though obviously those are all connected. But I think, I don't want to speak for Mike, but I'm going to anyway. I think what Mike was really asking is, we haven't seen a lot of schools right now even look at that document, just because they have so many other things that are going on. Obviously, COVID's one of those. And then you throw on competency-based learning and teaching and PBL and tying all those different curricula together. You're one of the first people who's actually talked about, like, yeah, we looked at it, and we're trying to figure out what it's going to look like in our classrooms, and we're trying to do it. Most other schools, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know of any school or building really that has dug into that document and said, yep, we're ready to go. Start competencies on Monday.
No, I really think most of them have looked at the logistical side of it.
Yeah.
And just in getting everything in order, safety wise and process wise, for kiddos to return. As Stacey said, most of them haven't been in the building over 100 days. And
Yeah, that's crazy.
Taking care of that and getting teachers moving
I think a lot of it comes from the staff members that are taking that next step, and we're having those conversations. We just want to keep it in front of us. It'd be way too easy to fall back into what's comfortable. It'd be far too easy to fall back into getting focused on the operations, and we still do, but just keeping that as one of our rotation topics when we have our check-ins, that we keep it in front of us moving forward, because we know that that's something that we're ready to challenge ourselves with. And again, it takes all the parts and pieces we've been doing and brings it, kind of solidifies it.
So Stacey, do you think we're moving, this is a generalized question, do you think we're starting to move away from a focus on the operations and starting to consider the learning now in this hybrid, remote, somewhat face-to-face environment that we're delivering in?
I think it depends on where you are. I have a pretty close contact group with principals across the state of Kansas. We call ourselves Principals in Action Kansas, and it varies from where I am on the furthest west. A lot of them are in eastern Kansas, or a lot of them are eastern Kansas, and it still looks very different from them there, even in the Hutchinson area where they've just gone remote this week. So I think operations is still always there. I think it's an ebb and flow. I think you get that phone call from the health department, and all of a sudden you find yourself back into operations mode. But I really feel like as we climbed into this second quarter just recently, that we started feeling more like, okay, we've got this. I've heard Dr. Watson say a number of times, it's here to stay. So just plan on that. And if you plan on that, then you don't get hooked up on it's going away tomorrow. And I think that's allowed all of us just to push through and do the best with what we've got. So I wouldn't say the operations part's still there. We fine-tuned it a little better. Kids have become very accustomed. My little pre-KK kids don't bat an eye twice about putting that mask on and just coming and doing it. So they're able to just keep on learning because they don't know any different. So I feel like in our building, especially these last couple of weeks, we've settled more into, let's just do this and keep growing and changing academically and intellectually as well.
And don't you think your staff, I mean, you mentioned, pre-K and kinder kids are like, yeah, sure, mask, whatever, we got this. Do you think that obviously with all of the changes that have happened in the last 6 or 7 or 8 months, and that will continue to happen probably, like Dr. Watson said, through May, do you think the redesign process has sort of built that culture of resilience in your staff to go, yeah, we've been changing for the last 4 years. We'll pivot some more. I like that word that you used earlier. Do you think that has helped you be more successful as a district and a building because you've already done that pivoting already? Most
definitely. And that's not a personal opinion. I've heard a number of our staff members say that over and over in different settings, that they really feel like they could just move into this because we're accustomed to change. It might be a little bit different with this type of change, but overall they just felt like we'd personalize learning, and that pieces that comes across many, many times. I just heard a staff member share this yesterday with kids that move in and out of quarantine every 10 to 14 days. We've already moved to a place where we're personalizing learning. So when they're gone, we just keep personalizing it from where they are, regardless if they're in the classroom and they're zooming from home. So that again, it's been very beneficial to have the last 4 years as our foundation as we've moved into this particular change.
You mentioned personalized learning, and I thought I wrote the name down of this particular kindergarten teacher, and I'm not trying to throw him or her under any bus whatsoever, but somewhere I read that one of your kindergarten teachers talked about a playlist.
Right.
Are you familiar with that? And I'm curious, when you mentioned personalized learning, she was referencing, I'm pretty sure it was a she, referenced the idea of using a playlist with kindergarten kids. And I would love for you, if you have kind of a grasp of what she's talking about, what does it mean for a kindergarten teacher in a redesigned school to talk about a playlist in terms of personalized learning? And are other teachers using that same sort of process in their classrooms as well? Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm asking a very good question.
Yes. Our playlists have been used anywhere from kindergarten to 5th grade. Andrea Graham is who you're probably referencing. She was one of our teacher leaders, had been a kindergarten teacher for us. And then this is her 2nd year of moving into the Title I classroom, not classroom, Title I presence for us, an instructional coach as well. So yes, that playlist is used as a variety across all those grade levels, and it looks very different at each grade level. I we love offering visits to schools who are early in redesign or thinking about redesign. I really missed that part of that this year because we can't welcome those outside visitors. But I uniquely remember a conversation last spring with a neighboring school district who was wanting to know more. And we were down by the 5th grade classroom, and I had a 5th grade young lady walk out with her playlist, and I had her stop and explain that to the visitors. And I couldn't have written the script any better, but she walked them through what she needs to work through in a given week and how many units she's working on in her dream box for math, what lesson she's on in her in the math resource, and how she's moving towards that next step in the curriculum. All the things that she's working on and that she's responsible for, and we literally just they look different at every grade level, but a piece of paper, or during remote time, we went to more digital type playlists where kids could cross those off digitally. But they take ownership of their learning with some guidance by the staff member. Our 2nd grade right now has a really strong both ELA and math playlist going. And you walk into that room and you would never believe that these kids have only been here into the 2nd semester. They're in charge of their own learning, which is awesome.
So obviously this is not just Mrs. Graham, it's not just kindergarten. So this has gone in a whole different direction than I thought it was going to go. Can you explain, I mean, if for me, because I'm slow, I need all the help I can get, Stacey. But for other school districts who are thinking about using this idea of playlist in a personalized learning environment, if they're going to either redesign or even as a competency or just because it makes sense, what does a playlist look like? If I'm in 2nd grade, I'm a 2nd grade teacher. What do I have to do? Who does it? I mean, you've already kind of given us a sort of an outline of what is on a playlist, but who creates the playlist and what does it look like? Do we update it every week? I need details, Stacey. What does that look like?
Daily, and the teacher has for lack of a better word, just the landscape ready to go. The students personalize that by putting down what lesson they're on, what their goal is for their, let's use ELA, for example. We use Lexia as one of our personalized technology pieces, but then they also are required to do some work with the teacher. So they would have on there that they've had a lesson with the teacher. They have some shared reading, some read to self, several different like just little check boxes that they work through in the day. And the personalized part comes with their voice of choice of the order maybe that they go in. It may be the voice and choice of not so much right now, but it used to be of where they did the work. They may choose to sit on the floor, the flexible seating, just a lot more voice of the student involved in that. But then the feedback part comes when they meet with the teacher to go over that playlist to be sure that they truly are meeting what the teacher's expectations are as we move through the learning process, and being able to reflect on that and take it home and share it with their families as well.
So as kids move through kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, this is, I mean, we've been doing it all along. So a playlist to a 3rd grader, that's old hat for them. They can figure that out on their own. How have parents respond to that sort of playlist, personalized learning?
I don't know that I've had a direct conversation with a parent about the playlist in specific, but as far as the personalized learning, it's varied.
Yeah.
We've had some that would tell us kids do very well with that because they've been
Yeah.
successful at the earlier grades and learn how to set a goal and manage that goal, and with some teacher direction or paraprofessionals or aides that might be coming and going to assist with that. We've had some that I've had some pretty hard conversations with that said,
Yeah.
my student does not do well with personalized learning. They're not one to learn to advocate for themselves yet, to go say, I do need help, or they're maybe
Right.
not great at the organizational piece. And that's been more of our probably 6th and 7th grade parents that have come to me with those concerns, because those kids just haven't had that opportunity as long as maybe our little ones have. So that
Right.
advocacy piece has been huge. Or maybe parents want those students to move a little quicker through the curriculum than they see is happening, and just so questions about that. But again, it all goes back to at least our parents are comfortable coming to me or to the teacher directly is what my hope is,
Yeah.
not the teacher to me,
Right.
that we can to make that better for their student, because that is the personalization piece. It may not work for everybody to go at their own pace, but in general, it's been very good for all of us.
Is that one of the goals? Was personalized learning one of your redesign, goals or themes that you were going to work on?
It was. It
Or is it
actually
just
came
kind of,
through.
okay,
Yeah, it came through in 2 of our goals, that we were looking for that more independent learner, students in charge of their
Yeah.
learning. It also brought in that PBL part as well, because that project-based learning was also a time when they could do more voice and choice. And in both of those, the focus is on the academic gains, but it's also on those essential skills or soft skills or 21st century, whatever we choose to call them. But we just
Right.
know our students need to be
Right.
more successful with that advocacy piece, responsibility, collaboration, all those things that we know will take them through to be ready for that next step after high
Right.
school.
So where did that idea come from? I mean, the playlist, I've heard that term before. Is there one specific for other teams, other schools who are thinking about personalized learning as a goal or as a target? Where did you all go to find information about that? Who did you talk to? Or you just like
I
made
wish
this
I
up
could
on the fly?
remember. I don't remember
Okay.
exactly. One of the things we found through this, Glenn, is wow, collaboration and cooperation across our state and nation. Because we,
Yeah.
like I said, how many interviews have we had or opportunities to share this with our schools?
Right.
Whenever we've got an idea, we throw it out to somebody else. And if somebody else has done it, we're not afraid to say, hey, can we borrow that?
No
Here's
kidding.
ours. You can borrow that and tweak it. So I'm not 100% sure where that developed from. I'd have to go back and ask Andrea at some point, but just many conversations.
Yeah.
And again, early on with the Mercury schools, we had opportunities to get together with them.
Yeah.
Here's what we're doing. What are you doing? What can we share, develop together? So I don't know where to give that applause to. But again, once it happens here and starts rolling through our
Yeah.
building,
Yeah.
then we start, hey, I can
Yeah.
tweak it this way for this age group, or this would work for this content area. So it's fun to get out of the silos again and to learn and
Yeah.
collaborate together.
It's that old adage we have in education: let's beg, borrow, buy, or steal it. So we did.
Yeah.
So, hey, I have a question about the upper grades and their personalized learning and taking control of voice and choice. How are you doing that, and how well is it received by the students?
Our first content area to really do that, probably the strongest, was our math area. And she's the one who's embraced that competency too, because she's our current 8th grader. She's had since 4th grade because of the rotation. I had her in early on as a new staff member. She did some 4th and 5th, and we had a 6th and 7th, and I flipped her to 6th and 7th. And now she's going up to 8th grade. So she's got a very solid understanding of these standards and has rolled right into the competencies. She would present the lesson to a small group that may be close. Like, I'm just going to go back to the resource we had last year. We've changed resources this year too, on top of everything else. But she would say, I'm ready for lesson, kind of like McDonald's, who's up next? 6.1. And anyone that was ready for that lesson would come to a side table. She'd present a small lesson and they'd begin their work. And across the rest of the classroom, students would be either watching a video to go with the resource and doing their work independently, hands up whenever they might need help. A lot of asking neighbors nearby if they could assist. So they didn't always require the teacher to help with that learning. And then she would basically just watch and see where they were going and kind of keep them on track when they got ready at a point to be ready for a pre-assessment or assessment, they'd let her know, she'd get that test to them and they'd get started. So it was, that's an amazing classroom to come in and out of. It looks a little different this year because of the resource we've chosen. And we went with a different resource we're not pacing it quite like that. It's more of a group pace, but we're looking a lot more at the small group learning and the collaboration part with a lot more hands-on that we felt like we needed from some of our data we were getting back from our assessments, as well as how students were doing later in high school in math, as well as some ACT type things. So we switched our gears a little bit there, but she had a well-oiled machine. Like you walk in and you could just look at the board and see where every student was because they were moving around and personalizing that to meet their needs. I was really interesting. One of the days I remember very well, I was walking through and a young lady had said she was ready for an assessment. And I could tell by the teacher's face, she wasn't real sure that was what should be happening next. But again, part of failing forward, she offered the assessment, she finished it, they did the grading. She was not ready for the assessment. She hadn't done her work previously. So that was a great conversation for that teacher and that student to say, you know, what are your next steps now? So she chose to go back, pick up where she was in her lesson sequence and ended up doing fine with that. So again, just teaching kids to fail, that's hard for them. It's probably harder for parents too, that failure is part of it. And we can't have them failing in a place that's comfortable and a place where they're secure. That's just something they're going to have down the road that they're going to meet up with some point in time. And if they have some skills to fall back on, that will be helpful to them in the future. Not that we plan failure, but if it's there, let's learn from it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
no, absolutely.
Well, at least we recognize now that failure can be a learning process. Prior years, decades before, we didn't allow failure, and failure was a stigma. So it's good. So it's good.
On the ELA side, more of they have the whole group lesson, but they have some voice and choice, and we use again a technology piece for them, the Reading Plus program, which is dyslexia, some things that they personalize there. And then in the science and social studies, I've got a phenomenal new teacher who I can't believe she's brand new. She had been a member of our community, a member of our site council, so very much had heard about what we were doing with Redesign, but then came in and went through the Masters of Teaching program at K-State and has fully licensed as of this summer. Phenomenal work with entrepreneurship within the classroom, lots of project-based learning, lots of small group. I love to go in her room, especially when we're in the middle of kids on quarantine, and there at every table might be a Chromebook with the kid at home, conversations going with their table mates, just like they were there in the classroom, other than they're on a computer. So amazing staff. That's what I keep coming back to every time you pose a question of how this is working. So, yeah.
Was there any turnover? This is a question I get from a lot of redesign interested sorts of districts. Was there turnover when you went down this path? I mean, obviously now sounds like you have some phenomenal people. Was it always like that?
We have been blessed with phenomenal people, and I can tell you that general staff turnover, they've left because of a lot of them have been married off. I can't find the fellows to keep them here, but I keep in contact with all of them, and a lot of that's because where they've landed in their next district, I want them to have the change there that they saw here. And so enabling them to be teacher leaders in the districts that they've landed in has been fun. So I might get a text of, help here, a resource here. How do I say this differently? So just helping them continue to grow with where they are again. As we talk about Kansas as a whole, that collaboration and cooperation, if they can take it to their district and go with it, it's been exciting. So, and it's been uncomfortable for some, I'll tell you that, even though in our hiring process, we're very explicit about the questions we use and kind of guide them towards redesign. And please be aware of what you're coming into. It's much different than just being handed a script or a textbook and go with this. That personalization piece requires a lot of time. And so we want that to be very transparent as we bring new staff in.
So has that changed your hiring process? I mean, it obviously sounds like it, changing the questions that you ask, what you're asking them to do in that interview process. How does that look different now than it did 5 years ago? We
just kind of revamped some questions. There are some that are still there, but we went back to some, the innovator's mindset, the book there, he had some questions that he poses for innovators that, again, going back to that being okay to fail, trying new things, not getting stuck where you are. So just some scenarios that we also include a lot of the social emotional learning type questions now, relationship building, just that resilience piece is there as well in our questions.
Well, one of the things, Mike, I don't know if I just interrupted you. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, you're busy thinking. Let those squirrels loose in there.
Oh, they're going on.
One of the things that's scary. One of the things that we at ESDAC have really focused on over the last 3 or 4, 5 years is the social emotional piece, the trauma informed practices. We have some phenomenal trauma people. Rebecca Pancras is doing some amazing stuff across the state and across the country. And so when you mention that, I'm assuming that, and again, I was able to just like tip of the iceberg, find out some of the things that you and your staff are doing at Stockton. But one of the things that it seems like you're focusing on is trauma-informed practices. So I would love for you to share what you've done and what's worked in terms of trauma-informed practices, what impact that has had. I've got lots of questions about that because I'm still learning, but I'd love for you to share with the people listening what's worked and how do you know what's worked.
Okay. So interestingly enough, prior to Redesign, that first year of KISA, actually, we took rigor and responsive culture as our 2 R's. And as we began looking at the responsive culture piece, I'd heard about Rebecca being out west at Oakley, actually, and I'd heard some really phenomenal feedback with one of her early sessions there. So even before Redesign, Rebecca came and joined us in August of that year before we even knew that's the route we were going to go. So she sometimes jokingly says she cut her teeth on us, and we were one of her early schools. And she was excited for that. And so she's a partner with us. She's part of our family. She's my go-to person if I've got questions. Cool. So very early on, we knew in that responsive culture part that was and also with relationships, but we started that. So she came out 3 times during that first school year and worked with our staff. And then since that time, we've sent student or staff to some national conferences, some local. We're presenting here in November at the conference as well. Our staff has just been eating that through book studies. Just really changing our culture to being sure we're here for all kids. And for a while there, and especially last year, I'll tell you, last year was probably my hardest year, 30th year in education, probably my most difficult. And I think it was because of the nature of so many crisis. We had so many kiddos who just, things that are beyond our control here in the school setting, all the trauma pieces they bring. So just us being more aware of that and working with families, working with health, medical health and all those things. Just a lot of kids in crisis, which took up a lot of our days and just wears on staff like none other. But so many calls to Rebecca to say, help me out here. I had a parent who also contacted her as well. So it's just different.
Yeah. So what changes have you seen in students, both even in that social emotional realm, but also maybe even the academic realm as that culture in your building has changed?
Mm-hmm. So if we look at that social emotional goal for our redesign, we chose to go with zones of regulation. So we use that systems wide. So that's even through our 812 building, habits of mind, looking at the responsive culture of just, we have these little reminder cards we wear with us, just that so we're consistent with the way we pose questions, so we don't trigger kids, but really help them analyze what it is that is going on and let them put that back into their control of how they respond. Just everything about our day is different. Again, prior to COVID, we had peace corners in every classroom. So we still have some places where students can regulate and a sensory walking hallway. Our counselor is amazing. We chose to move away from her going into rooms, giving 30-minute lessons to just being a resource for all and just responding to whatever needs may arise with groups of students or individual students or classrooms as social emotional learning developed. We've also taken, again, when we looked at redesign with no new monies, but taking what you have and reallocating it, we had this amazing computer lab, but we were a one-to-one school. So we took that bold step of taking a part everything in there and dispersing what desktops we had in there to classrooms. And then we initially used that room as just a room for a bigger space for PBLs, a place for presentations. And about halfway through last year, we thought we're still not utilizing that space, and it's an amazing space. What else can we do? Well, our counselor wrote a couple of grants, so it's a regulation room now.
Wow.
And we've got some phenomenal things, tools, but more importantly than the tools is kids know how to come in and create their own toolbox so that they can regulate and return to learning. And just permission to, just a little bit ago, before I jumped on here with you, I'm sitting in a class room with a third grader who's just struggling with learning and interrupting that of others. So just coming along and sitting beside her, whether she wanted me there at that moment or not, she needed me, and getting her back on track. So
Yeah.
just more of all kids. Another big piece of our redesign has been the community groups based on the family structures, and also Rebecca Bailey's work, as well, just that relationships first. So what it looked like prior to COVID is from 8:10 to 8:40, when students entered our building, they checked in with classrooms, but then directly went to their community groups, which are mixed age groups of pre-K 7 students. And they had that same adult, or hopefully two adults, all the way through their time with us here. And then we also matched our pre-K 7 group with the 8-12 group. So we met with them quarterly. So when students leave here as 7th grade, they move into an 8-12 group that they already know that adult, or at least some of the students in that community as well. So that's a big part of where we're starting our social emotional learning in the morning, our habits of mind, our Tiger Touchstones. That was something we developed in 2014, some strong character traits that we wanted our students to live out every day. So that's the part we're missing the most. Actually, yesterday, our check-in meeting with our staff was, how do we find a way to bring those family groups back, those community groups back in the midst of COVID, and not doing a lot of mixing of our stable groups, but we need to see each other. So.
I do want to come back to the communities. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I thought this might be a good place just to put in a shameless plug for the Bridging to Resilience conference that on November 11th, 12th, and 13th, that is a virtual conference that, for our audience, if you want to learn more from Stacey and get the real details in depth, come to that conference, go to the SDAC website and Bridging to Resilience conference, and be sure to go to Stacey's session, and they'll give you the details.
And it'll be better than me, because you'll have 3 of my staff members who live and breathe it every single day. So you'll get to hear. And the neat part about that is my counselor will be a part of that, a veteran teacher for us, but also a second-year teacher with us, who several of our staff members that have just recently joined us came here because of what we were doing. Just added a special ed teacher. I went with an open position all of last year and did not have that position filled, didn't have any applicants. And then in March, we opened that back up. It actually was open all the time, but it opened up, and we had a young lady come to us because we are a redesign school. She wanted to be a part of what we were doing, and she's been a phenomenal asset to bring on board. Super.
Great.
So yeah, the quickest way to find the information about the conference is just go to our marketplace, which is market.edsac.org. And I will be completely transparent and honest. I didn't know, Stacey, that you and your staff were going to be at the conference. So nice little segue, Mike. Good job. But it's something that we've done. What would this be? Third one, fourth one?
It's the fourth.
And the last time that we had, I think 500 some people attend, and we had people from all over the country, and a really good keynote speakers, because I can't remember his name, but he was a Boston assistant district attorney, and now is working with trauma informed practices to help young men and women figure out where they need to go. And he's going to talk as well as Stacey and her staff. There's a lot of really cool things going on at that conference. So definitely check that out. I do want to go back. I want to find out more about the communities. So hang on to that just for a second, Stacey. But seriously, Adam Voss, thank you, Stacey. The other Stacey, our background helper recorder person, Stacey. Adam Voss is the person, the keynote person. Yes. That seems like an easy name to remember. Sorry. But thank you, Stacey. Adam Voss, you can just Google him, like Adam Voss, and TED Talk. He has an amazing TED Talk. Check that out. And then you can hear him in November. So I want to go back though. Hang on to the communities, because that's something that a lot of people do, but in some ways it sounds like you're doing some different things with the connection between the high school, which I want to find out more about. But I want to go back to you just held up, like you threw this out like it's not a big deal, but I think it is a big deal. These cards, do you still have those cards that you just like picked up a couple minutes ago? Okay, so I have seen like sensory paths and quiet rooms and peace corners or whatever, self-regulation spaces, but I've never seen the cards.
Mhm.
Tell us what's on the cards, and maybe this is like something everybody does. Did you get that from Rebecca? And if not, where can other schools and other districts get those cards or those templates? Did you make those up? I have lots of questions. I want to find out about the
So I
cards.
went to my friend Tammy Mitchell and I said, here's what I need. We're struggling with some behaviors and some consistency and this and that. And she connected me to, and I'm going to forget a last name here, Jillian, elementary principal that she and I connected with actually at KSD conference last October.
Yeah.
And sat down together outside of a session and just shared very similar situations. So she shared her information with us. And again, I'm totally blanking on the school right now too.
That's all right. I can't remember Adam Voss. We're even.
So it's just, there's a set of questions for misbehavior and a set for disrespect. And it just, again, tries to take away the emotion, and it takes away what we might sometimes as staff imagine that we talk too much. So it just drills it down to like, what are you doing? What are you supposed to be doing? Are you doing that? And what are you going to do about it? And we've got a couple little friends that last year, especially, you just walk up and they're just looking like you're kidding me and could almost just answer the questions before you went through them. So that, and the disrespect is, how are you talking to either me? How are you talking to him or her? How are you supposed to be talking to him or her? Or were you doing that? And then how are you going to do that differently? So again, I think we find too, again, we could talk for hours here. I also brought in restorative circles a few years ago. And as much time as that takes to work through a discipline concern, I'm a believer in that just a punishment is not going to bring healing to what's going on. It's not going to help them through that next time. So those responsive times of the circles take a lot more time. But I hope during that time, kids learn to advocate for themselves. They learn that turn taking of talking. We have to come together and be respectful and responsible. When they leave there, I hope they can go out and the more times we do that, start to have that happen without me present.
Yeah. Well, Stacey, I know where you got those cards, because I've heard those before. You got those from my mom.
Okay.
I
need more moms like your mom, right?
Glenn, what are you doing? What are you supposed to be doing?
And I'm going to be in trouble here because I'm pretty sure this is probably from an actual program that I'm not going to be able to cite the source. So I'll do some homework on that. So. Well, yeah, that to me, especially, for example, if I'm a first year teacher or someone who doesn't have a strong background in, trauma informed practices or SEL, it's like, oh, this kid is just a mess. And I'm just going to I'll show you because I'm the teacher and the boss. It's like, nope, here's my card. And it almost looks like, so many teachers now have, lanyards with the key card or the swipey thing. What a perfect place to something like that as a constant reminder of we need to approach behaves differently than we were before. Awesome. I just, by the way, got a little up on my screen that says internet connection unstable. I don't know if Stacey, but I've been having all day long. Mike may have to take at any second my internet. Good luck with that. Okay, communities. I think I've done, family or communities, or what we call them.
Oh, I think we lost him.
But I haven't.
He's still talking, but he doesn't know he's talking to himself. So share with us what you're doing with your communities and how that's rolling with the trauma informed. And
what I did hear Glenn say before he did break out there, they're called lots of different things. And again, this is where our community voice did come into play. We had some parents who we were sharing our plans for redesign, and we used the word families. And one of the things that came up was we feel like we have a strong family their family connection was a family. Could we name it something different? So that's where we went with the word community. Again, just to, out of respect, to let parents know we were listening to the feedback they were giving us. So the community structure is based on the Ron Clark Academy, families, as well as several other, like I mentioned, Dr. Becky Bailey's work on that as well. But just giving that students the opportunity to have that one adult, that if they could connect to that one adult, that we know that would keep attendance at a better place. Our tardies were almost none because that was the first thing of the day. I've seen our tardies increase this year, partially because maybe we've moved up the start of our school day by 10 minutes, but maybe because they don't have that to look forward to at the very beginning of the day. I don't know. We'll do some surveys here that will maybe give us some more feedback with that. But so our communities, we sat down initially around a great big table, all of our staff that would be leading those communities, and just started talking about each individual student. For the most part, it was just like student, student, student. But if a student's name came up and that staff member already had a relationship with them, then we did our very best to place that student with them, because we didn't want to start with what we already have. So that happened a lot. We tried to keep siblings not together. Just some of the basics there. And then we just started meeting again in our pilot time of redesign. We met just once a week. And at that time, our kids were asking to do it more often. I will tell you that was probably in October of our launch year when we moved it to every day and we were coming together. That was probably a time that our staff maybe gave a little kickback, because that's 30 minutes of their day that they're giving up that they hadn't been used to build in all the academics around losing that, what they considered at first to be losing. They know that differently now. They know they're gaining social, emotional, but at first it felt like they were losing. Coming up with resources, because we also chose not to go with a program. We decided to develop it in-house, and we wanted to base that on what our needs were here in Stockton, and not just a package that we might be able to pick up. And we know there's some really strong programs out there, and we still continue to look at a couple of those, but we wanted to build it around our Tiger Touchstone. So we do a touchstone a week, a habit of mind a week, and then be able to fold those lessons in. And then we started a couple different online platforms. We've now gone to, I just forgot my word there. We have a dumping ground basically where we can have each one of our areas that we're working on, and teachers can share ideas and links to projects or movies or whatever, so we can not have to be searching for things and spending a lot of time. We can build that with each other. So
have you noticed, I'm back by the way on my phone, so thank you. Sorry for dropping out there. Have you noticed, and I don't even know the best way to ask this. I'm just curious, as you talk to other people, redesign people or others who are doing, trauma-informed practices and trying to build that culture, is it different because you're in a much more rural area than urban or suburban schools, or is trauma no matter where?
Trauma no matter where. I think one of the things that we've learned through this, I don't think our community knows the amount of trauma that our kids have. I think we're a nice, neat little community here, and everybody thinks they know kids like they knew kids when they were in school, and it's very different now. I don't want to disclose a lot about our demographics. But we've got some tough kiddos. We've got some kiddos, and again, we're 40 minutes away from the closest mental health provider. So that's a full day of taking kids out to go to services and get those services. And many of our parents, that's a day off of work too. So again, I could keep talking here, but one of the things we've been able to do is we were able to get one of the grants. So we have a mental health liaison here 3 days a month, and then we share her with another district. But that's been helpful as well, just to have someone else come alongside and help with that mental health side and help make some connections there. But I don't know that we're any different if we look at demographics and start breaking down by numbers, even though our numbers are smaller percentage wise. We've got a lot of trauma. And again,
so I think it's not, trauma.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We had a unique experience happen in April. We were meeting with Rebecca, and it happened to be the day they were interviewing, as DEC was interviewing Dr. Ross Green. So our staff was able to come alongside and hear that and ask questions. And it was that day that I think so many of us made that. Of course, it was right in the middle of all that change time and moving to remote learning and school buildings being closed. But we really talked a lot too. We look at those ACEs, but how those ACEs can sometimes change. And for all of us, COVID and what we're doing right now is on that list now. And so just looking at trauma differently, and just not assuming we know, but just being there for that, again, that all kids, because we don't know.
And I love what you just said there, because I mean, you're in the trenches with your staff and your kids and your parents. Trauma is trauma no matter where. I mean, for some of you, 40 minutes away, resources are just further away. The trauma is still there. It's just sometimes more difficult to help get kids the support they need. So I love the idea of bringing somebody in a couple, 3 times, sharing it with another district. That's just another solution.
We also welcome our
talking
therapists
about.
to our building too. We're short on space, but we find the space. We've got a couple of staff members from different agencies that come in and meet with kids here. And again, that cuts down on that having to go back and forth. And we've done more of the teletherapy this year as well. So students can stay right here and log on. Sometimes parents will come join them. Sometimes they'll Zoom from their home or work, but being able to make that happen more as well.
Well, we're coming up against 45, 50, 55 minutes. Mike, what I have one question I have left, but I'm curious if you have anything that you want to ask or share.
No, I just would, what's the one thing that you would recommend districts do if they're considering redesign? What would be that first thing that you would do?
First thing, go visit a school, but also when you visit that school, do it through the lens of your community and your students. That's one of the things we share every time somebody comes in and out of our building. Don't take what we're doing and try to take it back and put it in your space. Know your why, know your kids, know your community, so you can do what's best for them. I think one of the key little quotes we use from the very beginning is, don't pick up that shiny object because it's shiny. Pick it up because it's the right thing to do for your kids. So,
Thank you.
Well, this is very similar to what Mike just asked, but I'm assuming, I know it's COVID, so you haven't had a lot of visitors, but one of the first things I asked is that how many interviews like this have you done? And he said, well, I can't remember. There's been a lot. I mean, you've had a bajillion visits, a billion interviews. What's a question that you wished somebody would ask you but never has?
And I may have been asked this question, but I think I'm going to go back to this because the first thing that popped into my mind, I'm going to go with it. But leadership changes when you're a redesign school. And it fit me perfect because I'm very much a servant leader. I'm very much a grow my leaders. That's why I went into the principalship, is because I had enough turnover of superintendents and principals that every time that happened, I felt like we were regrouping again. And I didn't want that to happen anymore. So through this process, I've got so many amazing teacher leaders that they can keep going and they don't need that leader in front of them. They know that they can do the leadership. So you have to lead differently if you're going to really truly make it work, and let your teachers lead from that ground level, that very foundational level. They're the most important, and just get out of their way and support them with what they need when they need it.
Awesome. Perfect. I'm assuming, Stacey, that it's okay for listeners, both live listeners and those who are going to listen to the recording later, that it's okay for them to contact you at Stockton Elementary School if they have questions.
Most definitely. We did some Zooms last year just because of transportation. It's hard to be on the road 2 and 3 hours for some people. So we were welcome to Zoom. Staff is excellent at just emailing. We'd be glad to share a playlist, all those things. We want to help others grow through this.
Cool. Well, Stacey, thank you so much for taking the time out of what I know is a very busy day and sharing your experiences with both Mike and I, as well as everybody else who's listening, and the education community in a broader sense, as well as thanks for popping into the conference in November, Bridging to Resilience. That's going to be awesome. So thanks for doing that. Pass that on to your staff as well. Any last words, Mike, Stacey, anything else before we let you go?
No, I just wanted to say thank you, Stacey. It was absolutely fabulous information, and thank you so much for your time. We know you're busy, and just want to invite everybody to join us on November 18th for our next session of Inside Redesign. We'll be right here, and this interview with Stacey will be posted here just as soon as we get it rendered and ready to go.
It'll be up on isdac.org, so take a look, check it out. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Have a great day.
Stacey.